Welcome back to SportsLine here on News Channel 5 Plus. Another half hour to go. That means more time to talk with our special guest as we bring you, by popular demand, another evening with Jonathan Hutton from Outkick 360. And, of course, he is our News Channel 5 Sports Titans and NFL analyst. Jay Hutt, great to have you with us as always. Great job on the NFL and Titans talk. Switching gears to the Nashville Predators, they get the win last night over San Jose, 1-0. Obviously, they need it. As we sit right now, they're a point ahead of the Dallas Stars for the first wild card spot in the Western Conference. Doesn't look like they're going to be able to get that 3 spot in the Central Division. So it looks like the wild card route is going to be the way they go. And, of course, they want to avoid that second wild card spot, which means they'd have to play the Colorado Avalanche in round 1.
Yeah.
And obviously, they more than likely would not be favored to win that series. Now, I was thinking about this morning, Jay Hutt. I know going into the season, there were kind of low expectations for the Predators. But you look at it now and what they have, right? They have 2 40-goal scorers in Duchesne and Forsberg. They have a goaltender that's going to be a Vezina finalist in UC Saros. They have the guy that's likely going to win the Norris Trophy in Roman Josi. They have a much improved Ryan Johansson, who had the game-winning goal last night in overtime. With all that they have to offer, I almost feel like they've kind of underachieved a little bit. I mean, you look at where they are and you look at what they have, everything I just mentioned, shouldn't they be higher up in the Western Conference? I mean, listen, I know Calgary's good. I know Colorado's good. You know, Minnesota's good. There's some good teams in the West, but, you know, part of me feels like this team should not be struggling just to make the playoffs. They should be in a position to maybe, you know, have a round or 2 of home ice advantage. What say you to that?
Well, 2 things. I was going to point out, you know, I came into the season feeling the same way. I think Preds fans did too, about the low expectations, you know, high floor, right? Like you feel like you kind of knew where the baseline was and you didn't know how high the ceiling could go. Look, I think what we're seeing is the team we all expected to see last year. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Duchesne. I mean, finally, this guy's playing up to the caliber of the expectation. And I'll say this about this Preds team. I feel more like they're playing with house money than I have in recent years. I think this team, John, it doesn't really matter where they're seated. Hear me out here.
Okay.
In the postseason, because this team traditionally has played so much better when the pressure's off, and the pressure's off right now. I mean, I realized they had the President's Trophy and they made that run in 2017 was legit, but the year prior is whenever they went on that run as the 8th seed and beat Chicago and then bowed out later in the postseason. I feel like they're playing with house money and could make a run in the Stanley Cup playoffs as things progress. I'm with you. I don't want to play the Avalanche, but with the way this team scores and the confidence level that they have in net, I think they can go win a series or 2. And honestly, that would have been the expectation a year ago. I think they're right back on track, and that gives credit to the way they've built this team and maneuvered this offseason. They brought in guys that fit more of their grit and style than maybe what they had a year ago. They cut the fat.
Yeah, they did, and they've got back to what General Manager David Poile likes to talk about, the Predator way. And this success that they're having this season, I'm really happy for David Poile, because I know it wasn't that long ago. A lot of people said, hey, he's a Hall of Famer. He's the winningest GM in NHL history. But, you know, the game has passed him by. He can't put a team together. And one thing we know about David Poile, that guy he's a lot like John Robinson. He'll bust his hump to put out the best team possible, because he feels like this city and these fans are owed that. So, you know, I have the utmost respect for David Poile, and, you know, for them to shake off the adversity and to really, it's very hard to retool and rebuild and win at the same time. But the Predators have managed to do that. You know, they made the playoffs last year after a slow start. It looks like they're going to make the playoffs this year, although they need to keep winning. I mean, that's a testament to how determined David Poile is to keep this team relevant here in Nashville.
I love the guy. He's a very genuine he pours his heart and soul into the franchise, and he loves the sport. Very respected league-wide, worldwide with the sport itself, and has been the fabric of and the backbone of the franchise since it's been here. So I'm with you. I was one of those that thought, well, maybe we're about to hear a retirement announcement soon. And, what's the succession like post David Poile? If you would asked me that 2 years ago, I thought we would be discussing that right now. I'm glad we're not, because of what he means to the franchise and just a genuine dude. I want to see him win personally. And, I keep thinking that he feels like there's one more year and he's going to make that run.
Right.
And I thought that was last year.
Right.
I thought that was last year. And then, okay, do they switch gears, and does he step away? Does he retire and then they do the rebuild? No, it's been the opposite. And, in a weird way, I don't know if it's a good comparison or not, because the guys are they're not alike as much as I can compare them in this situation. I expected Pete Carroll to step down this year in Seattle, and he didn't.
Yep.
At 71, he's there for a rebuild, which I found really interesting with that franchise. And who knows what happens there. But going back to the Preds, I'm glad Poile's in charge. Let's put it that way. I think there's a trust factor there, even though we haven't seen the cup.
Right.
And they haven't met expectations in recent years. I've been pleased with what he's done in the rebuilding process, given the hard decisions that he had to make. And some of those hard decisions were keeping the guys that were busts.
Yep.
Like they would have traded Duchesne if they could have, if someone wanted to grab that contract. I'm eager to see what happens with Forsberg and that deal moving forward. But beyond that, I'm pleased with what Poile's done.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Forsberg, because my theory is they were never going to trade him because, given where they were, kind of like a A.J. Brown similar situation with the Titans. And I just feel like, knowing David Poile the way we do, the fact that, the trade deadline came and went and Forsberg's still on the roster, the message sent to me is that David Poile feels pretty confident he can get Forsberg signed to a long-term deal. I understand how tricky it is, given where Yossi is and given where Johansson and Duchesne are. You want to get Forsberg probably somewhere in the middle. But when you look at, he's the greatest goal scorer in the history of this franchise, and he's not even 30 years old yet. This guy has to be a forever Pred like Pekka Rinne, doesn't he? And Roman Yossi.
Well, I feel that way, but I also understand the business aspect of it. Is he the elite guy at his position? Are you going to pay him like the elite? If you are, they would have signed him already.
Yeah.
And that's where the apprehension lies. He's not a B player, but he's not the A+ guy either. And that's not a knock. He's just not the top level guy. But with that in mind, are you giving him $8 a year? Or how are you spreading out your money? And keep in mind too, I thought it was. Here's what I thought when they didn't trade him. This could also be Ryan Suter 2.0.
Yeah,
where
I thought about that too.
Poile trusted the process. He liked where negotiations were, and then Suter bolted.
Yep.
And he was left stunned. There was whiplash. And while I think he learned from that, and I don't necessarily think he's all in trusting this process now, it's hard not to trade the player to get something in return guaranteed, with the idea that you may not get anything if he walks. That was a hard decision. And the fact that they didn't do it, I don't know if they're close or not, but to me, they're closer than what maybe we thought they were at the trade deadline, because this is a tightrope if they're willing to walk. And if they lose him in the NHL, you gotta get something in return for the stars that don't want to be there.
Right.
And in this case, if he walks, they're getting nothing in return. That's a huge loss.
You're 100% right. David Poile could not afford to let Philip Forsberg just walk out the door in free agency without getting anything for him. Before we go to break, I wanted to ask you about UC Saros. I owe this guy an apology, Hutton. I felt like when Pekka Rinne retired, the consistent night in, night out goaltending production would dip a little bit. I didn't see Saros as a number one guy that can carry a team. Now, we'll see what happens in the playoffs if they make it. He was okay last year in the Carolina series, was not very good in the Phoenix bubble series a couple of years prior to that, or the Arizona, whatever they call themselves, the Coyotes series. So that has yet to be seen. But for the regular season, UC Saros has made a believer out of me. What an absolute great handoff of franchise goaltenders from Pekka Rinne, the greatest Nashville Predator of all time, to his little brother from Finland, UC Saros. He's been spectacular all season. Agreed.
And that's, man, what they've done a great job developing the goaltenders. They really have. And there's something there with Finland, right? I mean, you start thinking about where Pekka was and how they brought UCN as his understudy, and now they hand off the baton. It's quite the story. And Saros has a chance. Let's be honest here. If he goes, the NHL is all about the hot goaltender at the right time.
Right.
If he gets hot, and we've seen stretches of this, there's a chance where we could see him pass Pekka in the ranking order. Hear me out. If they go on this long run and it's due to Saros and there's consistent play in the postseason, in the big moments, not the Game 7 type performance we saw against Winnipeg with Pekka. That happened too. Right. So if Saros is consistent in the marquee moments for this franchise, that's where this really pays off, because they're banking on the fact that he actually becomes better than Pekka Rinne, who's right there borderline Hall of Fame worthy. If that's the case, the Preds are going to the Stanley Cup final again, and with a chance to hoist it, because it's all about who's in net this time of year and as we lead into the playoffs. That's why the Preds made the run they did.
Yep.
They had some clutch scores, and they had some great role players that stepped up and made some key goals, clutch goals, and there were 9 or 10 different guys that contributed on that run, but the key cog was Pekka. And it comes down to Saros for this postseason run. I like how you phrase this. If they make the playoffs, and then if they make a run, it's between the pipes.
Yeah, and the good news is also that, they have a really good goaltender that they drafted a couple of years ago that they'll develop in the system, and there'll probably be another really good handoff. So it looks like the goaltending position is in good shape. All right, Hutton, we're going to take one more break, come back. I want to talk about the other new stadium that is about to open, Nashville SC's beautiful stadium on the fairgrounds. More on An Evening with Jonathan Hutton. Stay with us here on SportsLine.